Okay, so we will dispense with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Madam City Clerk, can you do the roll call, please?
Certainly. Councilmember Chow. Councilmember Singh.
Oh, here.
Okay.
I'm here.
Councilmember Willie. Vice Mayor Paul.
Here.
Mayor Sharp.
Here. Okay, so we don't have any ceremonial matters today that I see here. Let's go on to postponements. Madam City Clerk, are there any postponements?
No postponements, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, now we're on to oral communications. Do we have anyone that wishes to speak for oral?
Yes, we have Stanley, and I will allow him to speak.
Okay, welcome Stanley, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. This is Stanley Young with IFPTE Local 21, representing the CEA, Cupertino Employees Association. I am here tonight to let the council know that the city staff and Local 21 this afternoon worked out an agreement that would change some things that were in a city memo that Local 21 disagreed with. I think that going forward now, we made it clear respectfully and diplomatically that we would like to be added to discussions prior to all decisions being made that impact our members. And I think the city manager took that very seriously and also directed her staff and the employee relations or labor relations administrative services to reach out and set up a meeting today that we had this afternoon. So I just would like to say that we are happy that we reached agreement. And during a pandemic, it was our priority at Local 21 to make sure that every member we represent maintains healthcare and maintains their job. I think that for a working family or working person to lose their healthcare and job in this type of climate would be very, very bad for what would happen to themselves in their life. So we want the city of Cupertino to make sure that they respect the unions that are represented there. And I believe we had made that clear. And I just want to thank everyone for listening to my concerns. And also I'd like to thank a couple of the allies we have on city council that reached out to me. It means a lot because our members are on the front lines from this city throughout the entire Bay Area. And I just want to thank you. And I wish you and your families are safe and well. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Stanley. Next, Madam City Clerk, we have Mooney.
Yes, I will allow him to talk.
Okay, welcome, Mooney.
Okay, don't unmute yourself.
Mooney, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
All right, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, dear council and mayor. My name is Muni Madhipatla, resident of Cupertino. I'm here representing myself. And I really appreciate, you pulling back, removing the poorly designed housing survey. And I appreciate and thank you for listening to the community voices. I do want to emphasize the need for a well-designed community survey that's neutral and gives residents a wide range of options instead of forcing them to select among bad choices. And that's how I felt, when I took that survey. You may want to leverage, the housing and planning commissions to come up with a survey. Why waste money on some expensive consultants doing such a poor job as witnessed in this case, when we have all the talent in the city office and commissions sitting idle because of, COVID-19. I understand, the works developer is planning to develop approximately 240 units of housing at the shopping complex that's zoned for retail. In my opinion, a for sale housing development project that fits the character of our city is a welcome project. I believe, the developer is entitled for some moderate allowances on general plan based on some state laws. But I'm not aware of, any state law that allows them to a total exemption from the general plan. So I understand that the developer is trying to claim exemption from the general plan. So that's a huge concern for me. If that were to happen, I would encourage you to take legal action as you would against, any ordinary resident for violating the general plan. There is a reason why we have general plan and the municipal code. Everyone is supposed to follow it. Doesn't matter big or small. And I expect, the city to enforce it. We have seen enough times over the last 6 years, our community is resolved to stand up together to fight special interests. Collecting 5,000 signatures over a 3-week window, not a big deal. So we can put any decision on the ballot and repeal it. Uh, you know, so I want to remind the team here that let's do what makes sense for the city and the community, not what generates the maximum profit for some special interest groups. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mooney. Was there anyone else? Oh, I see Luke Lang.
Jennifer Griffin is,
Oh, Jennifer. Welcome, Jennifer.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council and staff. Hi, I'm Jennifer Griffin, and we need to watch SB 209 902 very, very carefully. This is Scott Wiener's replacement for SB 50 that was introduced. I believe it was in January, right after SB 50 was defeated. I think he did it the same day. It was halted a little bit during the pandemic, but I understand that the senators are going back to Sacramento to begin work. I don't know why the assembly people are not going back, but I'm very concerned that something will be done to expedite SB 902. They have to make the decisions by August, and we have a very shortened congressional legislative session because of the pandemic. But we want to make sure that things like SB 902, which is a horrific bill, which would allow duplexes, fourplexes on single-family lots. Again, it's the same rehash of SB 50 and SB, I think, 827 or something. That this is not expedited, and that we take the pandemic as a route to expedite something like this. No one could predict the pandemic, but I really, really think that it's very important that we watch how this bill is put forward in the next weeks and make sure that the entire state has a way to say their piece on whether they want this bill or not. I think this bill is horrific, and I think we need to do everything possible to encourage that it does not proceed. But I want to make sure that we don't have any parliamentary irregularities because of the pandemic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Madam City Clerk, who's next?
we have Luke Lang, and I will allow him to speak.
Great.
Mr. Lang?
Mr. Luke, unmute yourself or don't. Okay, no.
Mute myself. Okay, I'm here.
Thank you. You're there. Great.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm here to talk about the density bonus waiver requested by the Westport project. Okay. Almost 3 months ago, on February 11th, I sent the council an email along with San Francisco Planning Department's interpretation of the density bonus waiver. And based on their interpretation, Westport does not qualify for the density bonus waiver. And I requested the city, somebody get back to me. It's almost 3 months now. I haven't heard from anybody. And it looks like Westport is moving ahead. Are they or are they not allowed to have this density bonus waiver? Right? Now, I understand the city council members have personal preference idea about whether a project is good or bad for the city, and you have been elected to represent us to make that decision. However, you have not been elected to interpret the law, right? So this is a legal question that needs to be answered, all right? And some amount of homework has been done by San Francisco Planning Commission already. And you know, I think the residents need to understand, you know, did the San Francisco Planning Commission make a wrong interpretation, or are they right, and the Westport is not entitled to a density bonus waiver? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Luke. So, Madam City Manager, are we going to have an answer? Because I have asked for this same thing as well.
With regard to the discussion with the city attorney, I think you're going to have an answer. I would take it offline and
Okay.
check in with the office to see if what we have pending.
All right, very good. Thank you. Madam City Clerk, is there anyone else?
I just received a text from one of our commissioners saying that she's waiting to speak, but I don't see her. Sashi Begor, I do not see her. Sashi, please raise your hand if you do wish to speak. *9 if you're a caller. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I will allow you to speak, caller. Go ahead. Caller 1234.
Yes.
Okay, go.
All right. Hi, this is Sashi Begor. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I wanted to bring to the council's attention my concerns with regard to a recent survey and also just the GPA in general. I have two questions. First of all, my first question was really to the city managers, why the survey was put on on Facebook without, it seems, the knowledge and perhaps the approval of the city council. The second one is to the mayor, is what action should we take in order to figure out what happened, why, and how this will be prevented from happening in the future. I can take the answers to these questions in a public forum. That would be great. My recommendations to the city would be, I think, straight, the mayor and the council must insist that no such surveys be released without the approval of the city council. I also think that the council must define the limits of changes, if any, that are allowed to the GPA. As a resident, I have to follow the setbacks and the height recommendations up to the last inch. Why is it developers always get to change the rules? For example, the Westport development, which is the Old Oaks shopping center, is supposedly adding 5 units to meet the density requirements. In exchange, they're requesting a height increase of 30 feet. Are they stacking all 5 units one on top of the other with no setback? And Westport is just an example, not the only one. Goodyear has the exception. God knows what Valco will come up with. So my recommendation is very simple. The GPA has to stand as is. No developer, no resident can change it. Developers, they took a gamble when they bought the property. They should have known what the GPA of the city states. We seem to have a reputation of becoming a pushover city. We need to enforce the GPA, period. And I would like for the city council to weigh in on these topics. Also, to ensure that if you do a survey, make sure the residents have a chance to weigh in on this so that we don't get the nasty surprises we got with the current survey and furthermore with the eyesores these developers want to build. Lastly, I want to recommend that any surveys that we want to have, they should be discussed as a required agenda item every month. So residents are happy to provide input. As you've seen, we gave you input within a week or 10 days or whenever that survey was out, but we often don't know when these surveys are being put out. And considering these are our tax dollars, we need to hear about this, when it is being planned, why, and if something is being changed to the GPA, why even have a GPA is my question. But to prevent such things from happening, we'd like to have more surveys. We want to be involved. We are happy to be involved, but give us the opportunity and discuss these surveys in a public forum. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Madam City Clerk, anyone else?
I do have one email from Phyllis Dickstein.
All right, go ahead.
Should I answer the question about the survey?
No.
I think the public should
all-
know that
this is
the survey is usually done at the
No,
staff
this is
level.
all communications. We don't
No.
respond.
I think when public has question, we can respond, right, to clarify.
Well,
I think the staff didn't really go out of their bound. I don't like the survey either, but it's in the past, it's usually at the staff rate level. We can change it to do it differently this time, but just want to clarify that.
All right, Kirsten, please read the email from Phyllis.
Certainly. Mayor Sharp and members of the council, I would like to address the issue of the major development projects in Cupertino. First of all, Westport, I recall that last year the developer presented a proposal for a project consisting of housing and retail, no offices. It was a basis for serious consideration and fruitful negotiation. With some compromise with respect to setbacks and maximum height, it could have received a welcome from the community. I fail to see why he has now replaced it with a project that is bound to arouse considerable community opposition. I would request that the city council work with the developer to revive last year's proposal as a basis for consideration. I would also like to see the city council devise a new Valco proposal with community input. Perhaps it could be similar to last year's Westport proposal, housing and retail, but adhering closely to plan limits. Perhaps the developer could provide the land for affordable housing and free of charge, but have it financed, built, maintained, and managed by a nonprofit, Mid-Penn Housing or similar organization that actually wants to do it, that considers it their mission in life. Thanks, Phyllis Dixteen, Cupertino resident.
Okay, thank you. Is that it? Is that all, Laurel?
All I have received, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we are on to reports by council and staff. So first, Madam City Manager, your COVID-19 report.
Yes, lots of changes since the last council meeting, full council meeting. As a result of the new county order that was issued Wednesday, but really not well understood till Thursday or Friday, we were able to accelerate plans to bring field staff back to work, which is great news. Since we had done good pre-planning, yesterday we were able to seamlessly bring back all but 3 full-time staff who could not telework, mainly in public works, field crews, and inspectors were all brought back. However, I would say that the 3 folks that we were talking about will be put back to work just in a phased approach this week. This involved establishing a detailed back to work set of protocols, including check-in stations, which there will be one here at City Hall for everyone entering City Hall through the main doors across from the library. And it includes details such as preparing for being able to interface with the public again in the hopefully in the near future by installing plexiglass at all public counters and all city facilities, making sure that staff is separated from each other, ensuring we're staggering shifts so we can ensure that. And certainly within the confines of City Hall, since we have very confined space, particularly downstairs, we'll be working to logistically manage that for staff to keep everybody safe. We were also able to respond quickly to the order by reopening most tennis courts on Monday. These are the tennis courts other than located at the sports center. And we are currently planning to reopen the golf course and the sports center tennis courts as well, which will probably be this Monday. Proper signage, again, logistics and management, preparing Parks and Rec staff for that is kind of at the forefront. We have repurposed underutilized staff to other departments so that all full-time employees can be working full-time. And we are working with maximum telework for employees who can work remotely. A little bit of bad news, just because of the uncertainty of planning and the coming months, we had to cancel the July 4th event. We've canceled the June picnics. The summer aquatics program is canceled at the moment, and special events greater than 100 due to us not being able to promote gatherings of any kind right now. Those events would obviously take planning like now or earlier in order to execute in the summer. So it's extremely unfortunate, since I know that our summer programs are very popular. Some changes for flexibilities within the county order are all outside businesses can now operate with social distancing requirements and face covering requirements in place. Small commercial and residential construction can resume. And something that would be great for the residents as well is that Recology is set to restart their full service on Monday. There are some really important considerations during this time. We're in a new and constantly changing environment. So anytime there, for example, is a state or county order issued, and we're expecting another one this Thursday, there's a whole flurry of activity of planning and execution that the staff have to do in order to be able, for example, to open up more things or be a little more, well, I'll just say open up more things, but according to the requirements that are in the county order. So we're expecting another one Thursday. We think that's good news because we will be able to yet have more things open, but we also don't know what the scope of that is. So we're waiting for that. We're hoping it will affect more of our small businesses in a positive way. Our city work now takes longer to do since we're addressing not only trying to deliver essential and non-essential work, but also working with the COVID stuff. It's just been super busy. We are primarily working remotely, and we have numerous legal requirements and logistical considerations every time we're doing not only our normal work, but for the COVID response as well. I can't emphasize this part enough. And I know it seems like a pretty big dichotomy because out there it doesn't look so busy, but in here it's super busy. It's constant. In addition to addressing the COVID-19 related issues, staff is continuing to provide city services as much as possible. I would like to say that staff is doing a great job responding to the pandemic, something new for all of us, unless one of us was alive in 1918. And so in these strange times, I just ask for continued patience while we continue to try and provide city services and deal with our responses to each one of these orders in a very timely fashion. And that's it for my update. Thank you.
Deb, before you go, can you comment on the issue of the homeless encampments?
Oh, yes. So under every single shelter-in-place order, and now there's been 3, the homeless are an accepted set of folks. In other words, they are not subject to the shelter-in-place order. What they are subject to, though, are all the social distancing requirements. So as a result, the city cannot compel the related agencies to move or relocate or disband homeless encampments currently. So there's that. How that normally works, though, is typically it is county's responsibility depending upon where the homeless encampment is located. And so we are doing everything we can. We are well aware of the location. And at this point in time, the city feels that we've done everything we possibly can to address, support, and help the homeless folks. Every time the sheriff goes out there, there's an offering of services. I think most folks don't know that once you offer service or you offer relocation, there must be shelter beds or housing beds available for the encampment, and they can refuse these services at any time. So in addition to that, there is if you are going to move an encampment, there is a 72-hour notification requirement to the encampment, to the people in the encampment, to make sure that they can manage what they consider to be their possessions and their valuables and all of that. So it's a long and arduous process and kind of complicated with regard to the number of agencies involved in a transaction like that.
Great. Thank you, Deb, for all that you have done. I have 3 things. Can you talk about the face covering ordinance? I believe We adopt that after the last regular meeting.
Yes.
And the masks that's available for business, some fabric ones too. Second, and the Great Friday outings that the city have been hosting. I believe the last one was sidewalk trucks. So could you talk more about
Oh,
that?
I forgot about that again. Sorry.
And the coffee talk, we had a great one last time. I believe you are planning another one. Could you
Yes.
mention that?
Yes, I can do that
Some happy notes.
I will do that. I've already forgotten what your first one is.
Oh, first one, face covering ordinance.
Oh, face covering. So I forget what date it was.
It's a 28.
Face covering
Right.
ordinance that was very similar to Milpitas's a couple of weeks ago. It basically what it says is it mandates face coverings for when you are out in public going to an essential place of business or an essential appointment, and then inside that area you must wear a face covering. Ours does not mandate, of course, face coverings while you're out and about, and it certainly does give parents of children age 6 and younger the discretion to do what they think is appropriate for their kids. Now, what I understand is the last face covering, the last order from the county, which was published on April 29th, their face covering order now is extremely similar to ours. It's a hair difference, but it's basically essentially the same as ours currently.
Well, it
Yes.
takes away the discretion of the business to not require it. Ours allowed the business to tell the customers they didn't have to, but now the business doesn't have that option.
Do they supersede us?
Yes, they
Yes.
do.
So then we should rescind our order
Well,
and
no,
then just
not
follow
yet.
theirs?
Not yet. Let's see,
Oh,
when they rescind theirs, if ours needs to go further. It's clear that after Milpitas and Cupertino passed our ordinances, that put pressure on them, because on every call that I was on with the county, that was the number one question by other elected officials, is why is the county not in sync with all the other 8 area counties? So yeah, let's not rescind ours yet. It's superseded by the county, but it doesn't hurt to leave it there for now.
It's a little stricter in some spots and not as strict, so we'll just see how it goes. I'm happy to rescind it anytime that it's appropriate.
And it's with the county, it's a misdemeanor violation. With ours, it's only administrative fine.
Right.
Okay.
So on the second question, the Cupertino Cares, I keep forgetting to talk about it. It's a program that I forget even when it came about, but it basically organizes a bunch of programs that help people get outside and connect in a way that doesn't bring risk. And the most recent one was actually on Friday. It was like Sidewalk Chalk Day. And it was kind of cool that I actually have a previous high school buddy who was taking a walk in Cupertino and started taking pictures of all the sidewalk chalk art that is out in front of everybody's houses and in neighborhoods. So I wanted to give staff great accolades for that. Whether they came up with the idea, whether they adopted it from a community member, I don't know, but it's
and
pretty.
the city provided chalks for
Yes.
people who are doing it.
Yes, and quite frankly, I think the sentiment of Cupertino Cares started with kind of that surge of mask donations, which will get me to my third topic. It got us donating to Kaiser and some local hospitals. I called Mountain View El Camino. And so just from that, it was almost a surge of, there's people that are still making masks, and there were some that went up to Sunnyview. The mayor took those up there. And we did get a mass donation of masks from an individual community member who wanted them to go to businesses and public and anybody else who needed them. So we're still using his 20,000 mask donation supply. And Public Works and Angela Sway from our economic development area has worked with our smaller businesses and made sure that they've gotten supplies out to each one of their restaurants or small businesses in anticipation that we would have had the face covering order for inside those essential businesses. So it's been a great effort. The distribution of those masks can continue, although they're slowed. Now she has a few that are still asking for them, so she can now distribute some of those herself. And we continue to get donations. We just got another big donation from SEWA. Is that right, Mr. Mayor, the name of the
Yeah, I think it's SEW. I guess it's SEWA. They gave us 950 cloth masks and 250 KN95 masks. And I picked those up on Sunday in Milpitas.
And they're now here upstaged with the other masks. We have, in anticipation that we're going to be able to bring more staff back, we're going department by department really. We have preserved, I forget how many, but a couple of cases of the disposable masks in case people don't have face coverings coming into work soon. And anticipating that our order of Cupertino branded face coverings, we did do an order for people coming back to work, including council and commissioners. So we will have soon Cupertino branded face coverings for everybody to use.
Coffee talk.
Oh, and the coffee, darn it, thank you. And then, you know,
I've done too many things.
Leong and I have had a very successful run of coffee talks that the last one in room we had was February was the last one we had at a restaurant. We've been trying to hit small businesses, which is kind of nice. We've done our first virtual one, which had, I don't know, 30 or 40 people signed in for it. And there's another scheduled monthly. These are monthly on a Friday from 8:30 to 9:30. And we're planning on another one this Friday. This time, what we're going to do is highlight, maybe invite a small business to come in and talk about what the COVID impact has been to them and what arrangements they've made to be able to open for business. And so we'll start with the businesses that are on our Open for Business page that we've been pushing out and constantly updating. So that's good news, I think. So thanks for that.
Okay, so now we're on to reports by council for their committees and all. Who wants to go first? Rod.
Thank you. There have been no assigned meetings since our last meeting, so thank you.
All right. Darcy, anything?
Yeah, there was one. I'll cover Rod's. It's the audit committee. He and I are both on that. We talked about, among other items, the budget format and sharing budget formats over the course of the last probably several months, possibly up to a year, from other jurisdictions to see if we could glean some insights and ideas. And we considered that in the audit committee. We had a number of really good questions generated between the two of us in the subcommittee that I think we're going to be adopting into a Q&A with regard to the Cupertino budget. And we also considered our investment positions in Cupertino. Overall, I'd say Cupertino is being well served by our money managers. The financial downturn is affecting almost everything adversely, but the investment positions are generally safe and well considered. And then a couple of days later, on April 30th, the Santa Clara County Joint Powers Authority met. Both of these meetings, of course, were via Zoom, like ours currently. We considered and approved the JPA's updated building policy. And on the agenda as well was our preliminary 2020-2021 budget for the library, for the entirety of the library system, I should say. And those were my two meetings. Thanks.
Oh, so Darcy, a few people have asked about whether the library could start any kind of curbside pickup service. Did you discuss that at the meeting?
You know, that wasn't explicitly discussed, I don't think, at the meeting. One thing that I was invited to do was help do some preliminary advisory interviews for the county librarian, which we conducted last Wednesday after our special council meeting on Tuesday. And I think between that and the JPA meeting, there was mention with regard to some expanded ability for people to pick up and drop off. And I apologize, of course, I can't attribute it to a particular interviewee if that was the mention, but I don't remember if it was there or in the JPA meeting. But the idea was to possibly expand spaces within the libraries, as well as be able to expand the hours in which people could pick up and drop off materials. Now, the key, Mayor, as we communicated with the resident who emailed you a couple of days ago, I think the key is going to be sanitation and being able to sterilize the materials. And so I think it's going to be a work in progress, but I think certainly at any point in time, there's going to be a value add if people can pick up and drop off in expanded hours, and the facilities were developed in such a way that recognize that. Now, I think we probably have a really prime opportunity to develop a space like that in Cupertino, particularly given the fact that we're looking at a 4,600 square foot expansion. And so I would imagine that it could be pretty readily adopted for that particular purpose. But keep your eye out. I mean, I think we can't talk about 24-hour pickup and drop off right now. I think sequentially we need to talk about sterilization, making sure that materials are safe between people, and we have protocols for being able to sterilize those.
Great.
Thank you, Darcy. I'd looked back only a week to our last meeting, and the audit committee was just prior to that. So thanks for covering.
Okay. Councilmember Chow, do you have anything?
No.
Okay. Councilmember Willie, Water Commission. Did they meet? Unmute.
Yeah, the Water Commission meeting was canceled for this month, and so was the Highway 85 Advisory Board meeting canceled. Unfortunate.
Okay. Well, yeah, I don't really have anything for the committees. I have been on all the calls with the county health department, which we have Wednesdays and Fridays. I appreciate that they finally did the face covering requirement, although the order which said wear masks when out in public didn't really say if you're like at a farmer's market when you're out in public, does that count as a place you have to wear the mask? Well, the order wasn't clear. The county council said, oh, we only meant it to be inside buildings, although the order doesn't actually specify that. So, I mean, my push has always been on those calls, please, can the county be specific and not be vague when they issue these orders? And I've communicated that to our county supervisors as well. I did get emails from our county supervisor today regarding hotel rooms for the homeless, and they are not just moving homeless into hotel rooms. It's not a wholesale move into hotel rooms. You have to have a reason that you would need to be isolated in your own room. So it's not something where we could move everyone in the encampments and offer them a hotel room. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So yeah, that's all I have. And I think we went around to everybody. So we are ready to move on to, let's see, are we only on consent? Okay, we're on the consent calendar now. Did anybody wish to pull anything from consent, either council member or a member of the public?
Hello? Yeah,
Yes.
I'd like to pull the item about the voluntary limit for campaign expenditure for discussion.
Okay, great. So if there's nothing else, can we have a motion to adopt the consent calendar? Someone?
I will motion to adopt consent calendar items 3 through 8, with the exception of number 5.
Okay, I'll second that. Madam City Clerk, roll call vote.
Councilmember Chow,
Yes.
Councilmember Sinks,
Yes.
Councilmember Willie,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Paul,
Aye.
Mayor Scharf.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, then we are on to item, let's see, which one?
Item 5.
Item 5, okay. Is there a staff report on this?
Sure, yes, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council, Kirsten Squarcia, City Clerk. This is, so candidates may voluntarily accept expenditure limits for elections. The voluntary expenditure ceiling is set by council every election year. So this would apply for the November 3rd, 2020 general municipal election. Candidates who accept the ceiling are designated with a black diamond alongside their name on the ballot. There's no force of law to accept or decline the limits for council for candidates, and council has no requirement to adopt this resolution. The intention was to keep costs low while providing a guideline for candidates to follow and to allow them to focus less on fundraising and more on constituent issues. The escalated amount from 2018 is based on the number of registered voters, which eked up about 2,000 since 2018, and as well as the consumer price index. And that is all.
Okay, so Councilmember Chow, you pulled this. Do you want to talk about it?
Yes. So I have a question. You said there would be a black diamond on the voter card. Is that?
Yes, in the ballot pamphlet and the ballot, it would just be a designation assigned next to the candidate's name if they accepted the.
So there is an explanation what the black diamond is for?
I would assume so, but I would have to confirm that.
Right, there's something in the ballot booklet that explains what it means.
Okay. The reason I pulled that is, so as I understand, this is not a state requirement, right? This is just something Cupertino does.
That is correct. Some cities do it, some cities don't.
Okay, the reason I pulled this is I'm not sure what's the point of setting a limit for individual candidate to get fund to raise campaign funds from other grassroots candidates when there is no limit on independent expenditures spent either for or against candidates. There is no limit. So then why are we setting a limit for individual candidates? What's the purpose?
No, but we're not setting a limit.
We are asking for a voluntary limit.
Yeah.
Then what's the advantage of that?
I think it's that some voters look at that and say, oh, isn't this great? This guy is not running out, or woman is not running out and collecting vast amounts of money from special interests. I mean, that's all I can think of.
Special interests don't have to donate directly to them. They will form FPPC committee to do independent expenditure.
Yes, that's true.
So then what's the point of this, right? And also it's not enforceable.
Right.
So,
and it's to make the voter look and say, hey, this person's not spending, vast amounts of money. Maybe, I like that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. So there is a spike in 2016 because our population increased and then dropped.
From what I can discern from the minutes there, in prior years, it wasn't only based on the consumer price index. It was based primarily on the cost of postage for mass mailings. So when the CPI was applied, it brought it up a few $1,000s.
Okay.
It was 28,000 for 3 years, and then once they applied the CPI, it went up to 31, I believe, 31 or 33.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. And yeah, I just want to make that point. I don't see there is.
Okay. All right, I see two hands raised. Rod?
I actually agree with Leong here. This is not enforced. I think it's confusing to candidates. They have to go sort out. They don't know ahead of time, right, what they're going to do, especially new candidates. And it does, I think, to the extent that there's money coming in from special interests. It does, right, encourage PACs to form where it might go directly to candidates and therefore be identifiable.
Yeah, more transparency, right?
Well, yeah, I'd rather see campaigns where we don't have third parties, but to the extent that people want to support a candidate, and every one of us has needed help, so we appreciate that. It's good to have those numbers come in. Some cities have restrictions, maximums. That could be interesting for us to consider, but I think what we have here is a system that is very ineffective.
Okay, Mr. Willie.
So I realize that this is about the potential voluntary contribution, but I think I'd like to at least touch on what I think is perhaps the a better approach for the same issue, and that is if the city would have a web page that lists all expenditures either by a candidate or by a special interest in support of that candidate, and expenditures by those special interests against other candidates. Right there, that's going to be so much more effective in letting the residents know how much and who is spending money for a particular candidate and who is spending money against other candidates for which the community's interest, the residents' interests, are not the primary factor there. So again, I'd like to suggest that the city, as we approach the election, that they have that on their website. The information has to be given to the FPPC, but for the residents to have to go to the FPPC site to try to decipher this, when we could have it simply put on the city site as a web page. And then they don't necessarily have to be limiting what they spend. It's just going to be transparent.
Yeah, good idea. Darcy, you have anything to add?
I think John's idea is pretty workable. I mean, as has been pointed out, there's so you can get a black diamond on your name and raise as much as you like. I mean, it doesn't look good afterward, of course, but I mean, it's pretty tough to get a sense of who's actually staying within that voluntary limit. And the other thing is that there are concerns with regard to restrictions upon free speech, and the state of the law of the land is that these types of PACs and corporate contributions are considered a free speech form of sorts. And so I think John's idea makes sense in that you have a readily available single resource to identify who has spent what on whom and against whom. So I think that actually sounds like a pretty compelling idea. At the same time, we'll be in the details. We have to consider the fact that this would be a new mechanism, and I think we would be pretty careful about how we effectuate it and be diligent about making sure that the mechanism we set into place, if we do set into place one, is effectively carried out.
Can we bring it as a study session then? I mean, so otherwise tonight is the end of our discussion.
All right, we can put that on a future agenda.
As long as it's, before the campaign season really kicks off, such that then city staff is prepared if we decide that that would be something that we support.
So I don't think we need an ordinance for.
Not an ordinance, just.
Yeah, for the city to put up the campaign contributions that they grab off of the website for, you know, from the state. I don't think there's any, that's something the council has to instruct them to do. I mean, isn't that something the city clerk could do?
Well, maybe our IT, Bill, would be able to connect the link from the FPPC.
Right. It is kind of nice when
Do
you
you have any
can-
comment about that?
Yeah, sorry, go.
Sorry.
Was that, who was that for?
Kirsten, do you have any comment about this suggestion?
Oh, so the forms are filed with the city clerk's office. They are, I did a quick look in 2018, there were about 240 forms filed with 30 committees. And so extracting that data could be a little bit time consuming. I would certainly be happy to take a look at that with a staff of 2.5 people attempting to add that information up to the web within 24 hours in some instances for certain forms. Could extend us to our limits, but I'm happy to look at it, take a look at it with IT.
Why would we not just have a link to the site that already has this stuff? I mean, it must be a huge job to
It's huge.
keep all that stuff current.
Well, my concern though is that each entity is going to have their own series of donations, which like we saw in the last election. And so this particular entity put donation after donation after donation. But now how do you sit there and combine that with the expenditures from, you know, each of the candidates and the other entities? Essentially, you want to know the ones that are in support of a particular candidate and the ones that are against that candidate. So they're just right there, and you can say, oh, this candidate is supported by these entities that are looking at the community's interests. Oh, we got these other entities that are not supporting them and yet spending this kind of money to go against them. And then the residents that are voting can say, oh, I know who I want to vote for. So again, that series of things.
That's not what we're discussing here. I agree that it would be great to do a spreadsheet that the public can see. So we can bring that back and put it on the agenda quickly because the election.
So 2 points. First is FPPC now has online filing. So it might be possible to just pull it off, and San Francisco actually has this on their website. Maybe they have a tool to do it automatically. I think, yes, we can link to the site with 200 some forms, but the public won't be able to go through it. Another possible way to simplify this is maybe we can then require them to submit a sum total to the city to a Google form that we can easily summarize.
We need to put this on the agenda. That's not what we're discussing here. We're discussing item 5. It seems like there's no appetite for this ordinance. So I don't, Madam City Clerk, do we just have to vote it down or just not do anything here?
If there's consensus, then I just won't request.
Yeah, seeing, you know, I could go either way, but seeing that there's already, you know, against it.
I think I'd like to go ahead and make the motion to actually keep it intact until we have some other mechanism and had to go through one election cycle. I think it's good not to upset the apple cart and do away with things. So I'd like to make a motion to go ahead and keep this intact. I have to.
If we are keeping that, actually, I think what's more meaningful is a declaration, even to say, I would not, I would discourage independent expenditure to support me.
John, I'll second your motion.
Would that be even more meaningful than a
Yeah.
map?
And then perhaps we don't renew it next year, but for the time being, until we have something better.
I'll
Okay.
second the motion. Madam
Great.
Clerk, can you do a roll call?
Councilmember Chow,
Aye.
Councilmember Sinks,
Aye.
Councilmember Willie,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Paul,
Aye.
Mayor Sharp.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
So that's great, but I thought everyone was against it, but that's fine.
We support John.
All right. We are on to second readings of ordinances. We do not. I don't see any. So we are on to, let's see here. Scroll. Public hearings. So we're on to a public hearing. This is Municipal Code Amendments to Title I, including but not limited to Chapter 1.04, General Provisions, Chapter 108, Right of Entry for Inspection, 109, Nuisance Abatement, 110, Administrative Citations, Fines, and Penalties, and Chapter 1.12, General Penalty for Language Clarifications, Process Efficiency, Compliance with State Law, and Internal Consistency pursuant to the fiscal year 2019-2020 Work Program Project Item titled Penalties for Violations of Conditions of Approval and Code Enforcement Best Practices. Publication number MCA 2020-001, applicant City of Cupertino. Can we have a staff report?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is Pugh Ghosh, Planning Master. I would like to introduce Philip Wilcom, our Senior Code Enforcement Officer, who will be making the presentation for this project, and then he and I are both here to answer any questions the council may have.
Great.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Philip.
Welcome, Philip.
Hello, Kirsten. If you can hear me, I guess my video is turned off.
We don't see your video.
It should be in your lower right hand, the lower left corner of your screen. Stop video. If
I got
there's
it.
There you go. Okay.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Council members. Yes, I'm Philip Wilcom, Senior Code Enforcement Officer with Community Development, and I will be presenting a proposed municipal code amendment for Title I, General Provisions. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, great.
So item number 14 of the 2019-2020 work program requested staff review of City Council imposed administrative penalty limits, as well as code enforcement best practices. In addition to that, staff also reviewed and proposed changes for consistency with state law, as well as clarification, readability, and internal consistency. For administrative penalty limits pursuant to section 110.140 of the Municipal Code, the council may impose an administrative penalty for egregious or ongoing violations, as well as the repeated failure to correct violations of the Municipal Code. Currently, section 110.150 establishes that the maximum amount of that penalty can only be up to $1,000 per violation per day, not to exceed a total of $100,000 total. The proposed revision removes the $100,000 overall limit. In terms of best practices for public nuisances, Chapter 109, Nuisance Abatement, establishes the process by which public nuisances are determined and how they may be abated. Currently, the structure of the municipal code does not allow an immediate response to investigate complaints of public nuisances, nor cause their abatement, until the City Council holds a public hearing and passes a resolution to authorize the process to begin. The proposed amendments streamline the investigation and abatement process by authorizing an administrative process to be initiated by staff. A review of public nuisance abatement procedures in local and neighboring cities indicate that it is handled at an administrative level as well, These cities include Palo Alto, Mountain View, Sunnyvale, and Saratoga. The proposed abatement process authorizes staff to investigate complaints. It authorizes the abatement work to proceed if the violator does not comply, subject to a warrant. And it also establishes an emergency abatement process, as well as establishes a process for the collection of abatement costs through property liens and special assessments. In regards to consistency with state law, the following changes were proposed, including increased fine amounts for building code violations, clarification that fine amounts apply to each violation versus each citation, the addition of a hardship waiver process for the reduction of administrative fines, and the deletion of an invalid lien procedure. For clarification, readability, and internal consistency, a new section was added to Chapter 104, summarizing the code enforcement remedies available to the city, and clarifications were made to Chapter 108 for when a warrant is needed to conduct inspections on private property. These are the several clarifications and revisions that were made to Chapter 110. Of note here is Section 110.050 was revised to add a 15-day minimum amount of time before citations can be issued for zoning and building related violations that do not create an immediate hazard to health or safety. These are some additional clarifications to Chapter 110. Again, of note here is a clarification that was added to Section 110.150 to ensure that administrative fines issued by staff and administrative penalties imposed by the council cumulatively do not exceed the maximum penalties allowed by state law. And last but not least, Chapter 112, the title has been updated to include criminal enforcement. There's been some minor revisions that were made for the consistency with the state law. And Section 112.030 was relocated to Chapter 109 for internal consistency. Staff recommends that the City Council, 1, find that the proposed actions are exempt from CEQA, and 2, conduct the first reading of Ordinance number 20-2203. That concludes staff's presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Okay, Madam City Clerk, is there anyone from the public that wanted to speak on this?
I don't see anyone.
Okay, great. So we'll bring it back to council for discussion. I have a question about the hardship waiver. Like how is hardship defined? And when it's a code violation that the person has the opportunity to correct if they wish, why are we giving waivers at all?
Yes, one moment while I pull that up.
Okay.
I can also speak. This is, excuse me, this is Laura Beaton, Deputy City Attorney.
Okay.
State law requires us to provide the hardship waiver option, so that's why it's been added.
Okay, so how is hardship defined? Do we know?
Yeah, so I'm reading. Go ahead.
Oh, I have it pulled up. That's in 110.080 of the revision. The party has to show that they have made an effort to comply with the first violation. So they have to make that baseline showing first. And then they have to show that payment of the full amount would impose an undue financial burden. They have to provide evidence to the city. At that point, the city manager would make the call on whether there is an undue financial burden.
Right, so let's say a homeowner has a violation and they have large amounts of equity in their home, but claim that they can't pay the fines. I mean, do they qualify for a hardship waiver?
My read on this is that this is at the discretion of the city manager based on the evidence that the individual would provide.
Okay, all right, thank you. I guess that's as good as we're going to get. All right, anyone else wish to speak? Raise your hand. I see Mr. Willie, go.
Just trying to get a little bit clarification, better understanding. So we're doing this mainly, it sounds like mainly to be in compliance with the state's regulations. So that makes sense. The maximum of $1,000 a day and removing the $100,000 cap, the limit. So with that, if I could kind of get some kind of perspective on this. So number one is, how many times do we actually see filing of this type of a violation? Do we have some type of idea how many and how much is typical for Cupertino?
Are you referring to how many cases in the past where we've applied the $1,000 per day up to $100,000?
Any amount, and I'm just kind of wondering, obviously, the bigger the amount would be the one that you would probably focus on more. But if it's all weed abatement and it's just the cost of recovery to have somebody go out and resolve the weed issue versus the daily type of fine. And so again, I'm kind of asking, can you put this in perspective in terms of what does our city normally see on a yearly basis, the number of times it needs to implement a fine, and to what level are those fines? And then I'll ask a slightly different question.
I see. I don't have all of the statistics in terms of
Just in general.
Okay, so generally, maybe I'll just summarize the process and our approach generally. Before we even talk about any fines, generally our approach is to first educate the public and offer some guidance to correct the issue, whatever it may be, before any sort of fines are issued or even talked about. And so if it does get to the point where fines are issued, our schedule starts at $100 for the first violation, $200 for the next for the same violation of the same provision within 1 year, and then $500 for a third and subsequent violation of the same provision within 1 year. And that can continue daily because every day is a separate offense and that violation continues. So I don't know if that clarifies your question.
Well, have we, how many did we have like last year, the year before, running 12-month period? 1, 2, or?
I can't give you accurate statistics there. I can certainly get back to you, but definitely more than a handful, I would say.
Oh, okay. See, that's what the mere fact, just kind of trying to put this in perspective. And so then the other question, which I think definitely is subsequent to the one I just asked, and of course we have one really big obstacle. I mean, this is when we're talking about $1,000 a day, removing $100,000 limit. You know, our biggest issue in our community is with Lehigh, and it seems like that would not qualify. I mean, or would it? Is there any way that loud noise, truck travel late at night, pollution coming out of their stacks and coming into Cupertino, is there any way that we'd be able to use this item to improve the community and reduce the effects that we see? That's the real question.
I can answer that, Councilmember Willie. This is Pew. With regard to Lehigh, because it is an entity that does not fall within Cupertino's boundaries, city boundaries, they would not be, that would not particularly apply to Lehigh. as it pertains to their land use restrictions that they have that would have to go through the county's code enforcement process.
Yeah, it's the county's jurisdiction, as is weed abatement, if I want to correct.
Weed abatement has its own process in our code as well, and it's just run through the county.
Right.
That's what I.
To John's
that's what I
point, if
figured.
the trucks are putting out debris on the roadway, do we have any right to enforce that on Foothill Boulevard, say?
This is Heather Minner, City Attorney. I just clarify that what's before you now is the process for enforcing code violations, not establishing various requirements within the city's municipal codes. So I would say that the Lehigh discussion falls within the latter, and this is just setting up a process for existing violations.
Okay. Leon, do you have anything? Yeah, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so I assume that a process will be established for the hardship waiver so that people know the exact standard who qualify or not, right?
Yes.
See that San Jose has a page on that. I assume that we can borrow from other cities, but there should be a process.
Yes,
And-
there is a process that I've already built into this code amendment. It requires an application and review for that waiver.
Okay, and I see that they have different standards for business because business might have a violation and they might have a different standard of qualification. Is that considered in our current standard?
They're currently in the code as proposed. It doesn't have a separate standard as far as residential or business properties go. It's the first step in getting a hardship waiver would be to figure out whether the party has made a bona fide effort to comply after the first violation. So if they made no effort to even comply with, and they're just asking for a waiver, that automatically disqualifies anybody from requesting that hardship waiver. With regard to, they have to, everybody that requests a hardship waiver would have to provide documentation about why this would be a hardship, and that documentation in of itself will be considered by the city manager before the waiver.
Is there income levels that they qualify? What type of income levels do I set?
There isn't one established in the code right now. It would be on a case-by-case basis. So, it just depends on the egregiousness of the violation and the amount of the fee, I would imagine. But when I say fee, I mean the fine.
So it's case by case, then it's very vague. And it could be unfair for one person versus another because no one would know what was the standard for anyone else, right? Wouldn't that be open us up for
Isn't there a set of things, Pew, that they have to submit in order to?
Correct. There is an existing hardship waiver in place for other citations, as for other, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is an existing hardship waiver process currently also in the code, which this kind of relies on for purposes of the administrative citation. And so this would just, it's kind of building upon that. But in terms of the application materials, they would have to give a sworn affidavit with supporting documents and materials demonstrating why this would be a hardship for them. And so that in of itself would be considered to determine whether the waiver is granted or not. But in terms of whether there's an established income criteria or an established amount, percentage of income that this fine would exceed, et cetera, that is not set up there. That can be done at an administrative level. It doesn't necessarily have to be built into the code.
Okay, so can you give some examples of what kind of violations this code apply to? And then what kind that will actually accrue daily?
Sure, Philip, do you want to give an example of that?
Yes, if I can clarify, do you mean what violations the hardship waiver would apply to?
Not hardship waiver for this municipal code, what type of code violations this might apply to? Because,
I s-
yeah, for common people like me, I don't know what code enforcement actually get complaints on, what things you're enforcing. So I would like to get some idea.
If I might, one example might be a sofa in a front yard that's been left, it's
Oh, so that someone
somebody's front.
can complain. So it's complaint based, right? Someone has to complain.
That is right. And Philip, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so generally, any violation of any ordinance or code provision where someone is required to do something or is prohibited from doing something, any violation by any person of those provisions can be subject to a citation, and these administrative citation amounts would be assessed to that individual as an alternative to any other remedy that the city has, whether that be civil or criminal enforcement remedies.
And so it could be as small as a sofa in the front yard, but then I think I have seen complaint from residents that they have violation like a staircase not built properly, and then they get violation accrued daily that they have to fix, but it's impossible to fix the staircase in one day, but then we are giving them fine every day. It doesn't seem to be fair at that time, I thought. And if it were a sofa, yes, you can remove it next day. That makes sense to stay daily. So shouldn't we distinguish between the action it will take to correct the violation? If it will take, well, the action couldn't be completed in one day, we shouldn't be giving them a violation daily.
Yes, and if I can speak to that. So actually in one of the sections that we did revise, we included a minimum 15-day period where citations would not be issued for zoning or building violations such as you mentioned. We would be giving that person a reasonable amount of time to correct that violation before even citations are issued. But that's a very minimum amount. And if I may say, I personally make sure that I give everyone a reasonable amount of time before citations are even in the picture.
Oh,
and
so
that's
usually,
a philosophy here. Yeah,
that's good to know. So usually they won't be given a citation immediately. They will be given sufficient amount of time to correct.
absolutely. More than enough time.
Don't do it, then we start accruing it.
Right. Citations are very last resort. It's like we're working with them, we're warning them, we're talking to them, we're saying, we really need you to correct this. Call us inspection.
For that particular one, also, I think on the same sheet, there were like 5 different citations. So it's actually 500 daily. And it's not 100 when they add up. And there is a question of, like John mentioned, there are different scale of violation. Some violation could be 100, but some violation maybe it could have been higher. But then for us, it's all 100. How is the standard in other cities? As I understand, for example, Palo Alto had for Edgewood Plaza, they had some violation. They evaluated, they assessed the fine. It was overturned. But then I'm just wondering, how is our fine compared with other cities?
And so our fine schedule is actually coming from state law and the government code. And so that's what lays out the schedule that we've adopted as our own, at least for most of our violations. And so that's where that comes from. Some cities they may not be general law cities, they may be charter cities, and they may have other abilities to have higher amounts or different schedule than we do.
Oh, so for us, the max is $100.
That's just for the first violation.
For first violation.
Yeah.
Oh, how about second? Is there a limit?
The second within 1 year of the same provision is $200. And then the third and
So,
subsequent is
but then
$500.
you said that if it's considered daily, then the second day is 200, and then
Yes.
third day it's 300.
The
That
third day
seems
would be
very
500.
punitive.
Yes, the third day would be 500 in that example
500.
of the same violation of the same provision. Yes.
But
And
then
every-
if it's consecutive days, wouldn't that be very punitive?
But Philip, you may want to spend some time saying how
Can
long it
we
takes on
not,
average to get there.
yeah, can we not make it consider the second consecutive day as a second violation so that it doesn't feel so punitive?
It takes
So-
a lot. It takes quite a bit to get to that point. So
It is
Probably
ve-
be-
Yes.
It's intended to be punitive because these violations are something the person can fix. And occasionally they're very ornery and absolutely refuse to fix it.
But
Correct.
if
it. And
the
it very
second-
much is punitive and it's
I know it's supposed to be punitive, but then if the violation is of the nature that it will take time to fix, and then they have started getting a fine of 100 per day, that's already punitive enough. And then we are saying, oh, second day is 200, third day is 500, and within 1 year, that usually I think this idea of second and third within 1 year, the thinking is second, third are different times, not consecutive days, right?
no.
So I feel that
So, Councilmember Chow, why don't you allow staff to kind of talk about the timeline about how long it might get to that point?
Okay.
Because there's quite a bit of time that gets that point. The person has a lot of warning.
Yes.
So
yeah,
Yes.
timeline
Lots
might
of
be
lots of
very long. Yeah.
Okay, staff, please.
Yes. So generally, at least with my process here in community development, for zoning and building related things, I generally start with a minimum of a total of 45 days of just warnings in writing, asking very nicely for people to stop doing what they're doing and comply with the code. And so it sometimes extends beyond that, much longer than that. And for example, I've had one case that was not closed until after 4.5 years. And we've given the person plenty of opportunity to work with the city, and they just decided that they were not going to work with us anymore after 4.5 years. So that's an example of how much we work with the public to avoid any sort of punitive fines before to get compliance. And so hopefully that answers your question.
So
That's
one more thing
good,
that I
but still, the first citation is the first day they receive the citation, right? And then the second day, it's considered second citation. The third day is $500 and 500 every day after that.
So if I may clarify that, so staff first initially initiates the whole process by sending a notice to the property owner, to whoever, to intimate them that they're in violation of the code. They're given, 30 days or 15 days to contact Philip to kind of get something going. They are then given time additionally to, let's say they need a building permit, to apply for a building permit. So at every step of the way, Philip works with the property owner to make sure that they're achieving the goals that are set out for them in order to obtain compliance. The only way that they would receive a citation is, even in that process, let's say they say, you know what, I can't get a hold of a designer or an architect or what have you, I'll need more time. Philip does work with them to make sure, staff does work with them to make sure that they had given enough time to get a hold of whoever they need to in order to comply with whatever the requirements are. And so at every step of the way, the only time that they would receive a citation is if they refuse to kind of move the case forward. And then Philip, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't go, my understanding is that we do not issue the second citation immediately upon issuance of the first citation. But Philip can correct me on that part.
Yeah, generally we do not, because once a citation is issued, we hope that they respond accordingly to correct the issue at that point. And we give them some time to decide whether they're going to cooperate or not. And when they do not, then we'll continue with the schedule of fines in the process.
So the point with the first citation, there's still time given to the property owner to come and approach us and figure out a schedule of when they're going to fix it. Our goal is not to impose the citation fines upon property owners and people that are in violation. Our goal is to get cooperation from them to make sure that they can come into compliance with our code.
Okay, good. Maybe
It's compliance. Yeah, it's compliance first, enforcement later. So our goal is to encourage them to come in and just fix the wrong, essentially.
Maybe I heard wrong. I think I heard earlier that the first day is 100. The second consecutive day is already considered second citation and third.
So it's just how it's applied. No, unless the violation is extraordinary.
Then it will be $100 until the city issues a second citation. That might have a certain period after. Okay, that makes sense now.
Yes.
So I'd like to clarify. The way that you had originally thought is correct. In an extreme example, the city can, for example, a week, 5 business days, we can issue, if the issue at hand is very egregious and we've gotten very basically no cooperation for something that's very egregious, the city can issue a fine every day. For example, for the full week of 5 days, the fine could be as much as $1,800 actually. So to exemplify what we're talking about, that is correct, but that's not how we apply the code in every situation.
Oh, okay. So it could be done that way, but we don't do it that way normally.
That's not how we normally do things.
Absolutely.
And in the last year that I'm not even here a year yet, but in this last year, I've only seen really 2 egregious situations that were not new when I got here.
Right, and just be cautious because one is under litigation now, so we can't really talk about that.
Right. So they're rare. They're pretty rare.
Okay.
Anyone else? Rod, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just share my experience after 8.5 years. There's a balance here, right? On the one hand, we want to be lenient with folks that are interested and maybe they were on vacation or whatever. But if a period of months goes by and the property owner is not responsive, we have the other, the counterbalance, which are the residents that are maybe impacted by the violation, who are wondering why the city won't enforce its own laws. And so I think, from what I've seen, these cases are not frequent, but I do support city staff having increased ability to get the job done if, a property owner doesn't comply. And I think from every case I've seen, I think the city has been more than fair with the party that needs to make the correction. Sometimes, right, to the frustration of those who ask why we can't get something done, why we're still talking about this months or, yes, in that one case, years later. So.
Okay, anyone else? I'll lower your hand, Rod. Darcy, do you have anything?
So does anyone from staff remember why we're coming back with a removal of the limit of $100,000? What was the genesis of this request? Was it an individual? Was it a company? Or because in the staff report, it does allude to a request from council that we go back and reconsider the limit upon the total fine. But what was motivating that? Can anyone tell us?
No, this was just, it came about as a city council program item, and it has been around for at least 2 or 3 years, is my understanding. But I don't recall how it came to be that it did end up on the work program.
Well, let me just suggest this. I don't think I don't think what happened was that we were looking at a particular violation by an individual or a resident and said, you know, it sure would be good if we could find this person more than $100,000. I think it was really more along the lines of what John was alluding to in trying to get compliance by very deep pockets that otherwise you just don't think of $100,000 as much. It's simply a cost of doing business. So my concern really is making sure that we don't turn this into a tool that could be used against residents. I do note that in the staff report, it states that there is no anticipated fiscal impact here. And by that, I take it to mean that we don't anticipate this elevating fines for any particular party. That being the case, I kind of wonder, well, if there's no fiscal impact, why remove the limit at all? But I also respect the original genesis of this, if I'm recalling it correctly, that we want to motivate compliance in a financial manner that is motivating to a particular entity. Now, I think if a resident isn't going to pay $99,000 or $100,000, I don't know what would be achieved by keeping the top clock running over the course of more months and even years. So I do have a concern about that. And then the other thing that I'll note is that the waiver is awfully vague as to metrics. You know, I think that our city manager would do a great job, as with other items, on exercising disability judiciously. But I really just can't see of a situation, and I don't think that the staff report contemplates it either, where we would be going to a resident and saying, we expect you to pay more than $100,000 of fine, and we feel that that is an administrative motivation for you to hence comply. So, you know, maybe if Deb could speak about that a little bit, you know, for our record for this meeting, that would give me a bit more comfort. But with regard to what's really motivating this, I really don't think that it's supposed to be some kind of hammer that we use against residents. And I appreciate some clarification. And
so can I say one thing? So if a resident reaches $100,000 and they've got a $4 million house, once they reach 100,000, they're gonna say, well, I'm just gonna keep the violation forever until I sell the house and there's a lien and it has to be paid off, because you can't do a sale of their house because of this lien, if I understand it correctly. So once they reach 100,000, they're gonna say, well, I'll just keep this violation in for the next 30 years because there's no upside for me to do anything now. So I kind of like the idea of eliminating that cap. So that is my opinion on that. Now, I do agree with you about the hardship waiver, that having no criteria is kind of vague. So if staff can comment, or Darcy, you can respond to what I said regarding the limit. That's
I agree with your rationale. I don't think this is ever a way of motivating that kind of compliance, especially from residents, but from a resident or residents. So I would just like to get some assurance that, you know, we're not expecting this to be applied, you know, based upon the language in the staff report, that we don't see a fiscal impact. And you know, just some assurance from our city manager that, you know, look, we're not looking to use this as a tool with any kind of regularity to fine our residents more than $100,000. It's great if you have a $4 million house, but at the end of the day, your money is tied up in your home.
No, I assure you, these situations are extremely rare. And I guess I would not see, I can't see a situation that would rise to that level of fine for an individual resident unless they were just completely refusing over and over again to comply with some really out of scope code, building code, or something that violates some sort of seismic or safety code. I just can't imagine. Again, we have only a few, or two that I can recollect in my memory, that have reached a level of this type. And certainly I would use it very judiciously if that's going to happen. our approach to code enforcement is number one, it's complaint based for complaints other than building code stuff. But the second one is that we try to educate and work with the person for a long time before any of these either citations or fines come into play. That's what I've seen over time. I've had the advantage of in this last year seeing kind of longer term cases, some short ones. I've seen complaints that go towards a violation of, say, the noise code, for example. And I see what these guys do, and it's always about trying to find a way to facilitate solutions before any of those fines or citations kicks in.
So I think what Rod said is very significant. It's not just the person being fined, it's their neighbors that have to live with this violation sometimes for years because the person just absolutely refuses to comply. And that's why I think that lifting the limit is so important, because once they reach the 100K, they go, well, now I'm just not going to comply. There's no upside. So I would definitely favor removing the limit.
Okay, the other part of my question was to confirm that there was no fiscal impact projected here based on the staff report. And that was a reflection of the idea that when we look back in the recent past, we're not seeing residents that would affect. Because if we did have residents that it would affect, presumably there would be some kind of fiscal impact. Is that a fair reading of the staff report? Can someone who wrote that line with regard to the staff report verify this? And why we don't anticipate a fiscal impact?
Mr. Mayor, if this is Pew, if I may answer that question. When we look at the fiscal impact, we were looking, like I said, this $100,000 limit, it was really for the city council. Staff would issue citations as they do. And if a violation rises to the level where the violator just absolutely refuses to comply, at that point, staff would then recommend that the city council impose administrative penalties, and that would be up to $1,000 per day per violation. And the $100,000 limit is for the city council to impose. So we're eliminating the limits that are imposed upon the city council at this point in the code. So I'm assuming that the city council would not impose over $100,000 fine or penalty upon residents, upon themselves, or someone like themselves. It would of course have to take into all the facts into consideration. As far as the fiscal impact to the city goes, yes, we have not had any referrals to the city council as far as that particular subsection goes. We have been able to address the code violations that we've had at an administrative level, but it has been inordinately hard to get compliance because of how hard our abatement processes are, and that's kind of what we're trying to address with this code update as well.
Okay, let's just verify this. So if we impose a fine of up to $1,000 a day, that would have to be visited by city council and approved. Is that correct?
For non-building and zoning code violations. So there are two kinds of citation amounts. There's the schedule that we were talking about earlier, which was the 100, 200, and 500 per violation. There is the other violations that state law allows, which is $130, I believe it's $700 and $1,300 per day for building and zoning code violations. They're two separate categories. However, in any case, the whole point of necessarily recommending somebody being called up to city council for a hearing is more about the appearance. Nobody really wants to go to city council for being called up for having a violation, and that's kind of another thing in our back pocket to pull if somebody is completely egregious about addressing their violation.
I mean, let's just be accurate here. I mean, this question was very straightforward. If there is $1,000 fine or something up to $1,000 fine, doesn't need to be approved by city council. And what I'm hearing is not really clear on either category that you're describing. So the lower amount, does that need to be that group where the threshold is lower? I think you identified $700. Would that need to be approved by City Council in order to exceed the administrative limit of $500? And the same question for that second group that you identified, where you state that state law allows us to fine up to $1,300 a day. Is that, according to our current municipal code, requiring a City Council action in order to impose that fine? So the answer, the question is straightforward. Does City Council authorization need to happen with regard to certain fine thresholds? And if so, which ones?
The City Council would only get involved if staff refers a particular code enforcement case to the City Council for that particular administrative penalty. There are two kinds of citations. There's the citation of fine, an administrative citation fine, and an administrative citation penalty. Administrative citation fines are all issued and administered by staff. An administrative penalty is when council gets involved, and they can impose that additionally to violators.
Okay, so what are the limits of staff's authority to impose a fine? What are the monetary limits? Are they above 1,000? Are they out of 1,000?
Yes, for building and code, for building and safety code violations, the maximum citation fine is $1,300. Correct, Philip?
Yes, well, per violation per day, yes.
Correct. So that's under state law. And Laura, did you want to add something?
I thought, if it's okay, I'd like to clarify. The administrative fines that Pew is talking about are administered at the staff level. Those can go up to $1,300 per day for building code violations, and that's at staff discretion. It doesn't go to council. There's an idiosyncrasy of state law that lets it go up to $1,300 per day at this administrative level. But when fines, if staff sees something egregious and refers it to the council for additional penalties, the council is limited to $1,000 per day.
Okay, well, this is actually not
Right,
really things a whole
I'm
lot.
more and more confused.
Well, hold on, let Darcy finish, okay?
Let me follow this. So with regard to being able to, now if we adopt this, can the staff then impose an administrative fine that essentially has no time limit? Or is that something that council would need to authorize if it went past a particular threshold? And if so, what is that threshold?
Currently, staff does not require council authorization to continue daily fines in perpetuity.
Okay, then let me get back to my original question. Why in the staff report now is there projected to be no fiscal impact? I mean, to me, it seems like there will be a clear fiscal impact because there's no requirement based upon this proposed code language that they go back to City Council. And the reason that we just got was that, well, you know, we don't anticipate City Council would impose this upon your own residents just like you. Well, you know, let's be clear here. This is throwing it back at us and saying that, you know, it would be on us. So what is it about this proposal that makes it look like there's no fiscal impact? That's my original question.
I'm going to ask staff a question. Is it as simple as that statement was put in there because there's no budget outlay for this?
Correct. Thank you. That is what that particular.
You could have just answered it that way.
Yes.
So the reason the statement is in there is because there's no budget request from staff in order to administer these particular sets of Muni Code changes.
Okay.
Thank you, Deb.
Well, that's a very clear answer. And so this is how I would feedback on this. It seems like when you say there's no fiscal impact, it means that it's not going to cost the city money to administer this, but it looks like you're not looking on the flip side of this. Is there potential for increased revenue? Is that fair? And does that cut across all staff reports where when you're talking about fiscal impact and you're saying, you know, what the potential for increased revenue is, that's simply not a question that's considered?
Well, let me give this a shot. For fines or penalties of this nature, it is not staff's goal to earn money off of it.
Okay, well, I'll take that.
However, like if you're thinking about fees and like that, the fee discussion that we had a couple of councils ago, when we like mitigation fees or fees when we're bringing in, when we have to permit a project and stuff like that, those are things that we're looking to collect revenue for to pay back the cost. So those are the differences.
Okay, well, I'll just stand by my prior comments. You know, I don't think we should be looking at this as a revenue generator.
Exactly.
I would love to have an accurate and backed up by data kind of staff report with regard to, you know, fiscal impacts on something that is potentially so impactful for particular residents or entities that are affected by our jurisdiction. Thanks.
We will in the future, if we're going to say no fiscal impact, we'll bring some clarity around what we mean by that. But it's usually when it talks about any kind of outlay on the city that the city would be making budget wise.
Okay, thank you very much.
So all things considered, since this is something that hasn't been done for several years, time to update it, be in compliance with the state. So I'll go ahead and move that ordinance number 2022-03 be read by title only, and that the city clerk's reading constitutes the first reading thereof.
Second.
Oh, just a minute. I still am confused about.
We also have to declare that it's exempt from CEQA.
Oh,
That would be good to include in the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Right. John, do you want to add that to your motion?
Sure. I'll motion that it be exempt from CEQA.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay.
Also ask the city clerk to conduct the first reading.
so there are two types we're talking about. One is administrative citation fines, which the maximum would be 1,300, and there is administrative citation penalty, and the maximum is 500 per day. Is that right?
It's $1,000 per day per violation, up to no maximum limit.
Oh, $1,000 per day for the second one.
For city council imposed penalties.
And the second one is when it's a council imposed penalty. And say, for example, for conditional approval, conditional use permit, a violation of conditional use permit, what type it is? Is it the first kind or the second kind?
Oh, that would be the first kind, up to $500 for staff level issued fines for a condition of approval violation. But
That's
it could be up to
500, not 1,300. 500. So that's conditional use permit violation, right?
Correct, as long as it's not a building violation.
Okay, then I have a question that right now we have a project that require prevailing wages to be paid to their workers. And I have inquired about this with staff. Is that a violation? It seems we currently have no way of checking. If it were a city project, yes, we have process for that. But now it's a private project that the state law requires them to pay prevailing wage. We currently have no process of checking that. Now, if there is a violation, does one of these apply? How would we find out? What's the process?
And I'd say that we could respond and have that conversation offline with you, Councilmember Chow. And
So that one, now none of these apply in that case?
Prevailing wage law is something separate from enforcement of the city ordinances that's overseen by the Department of Industrial Relations. But this is not relevant to prevailing wage.
Prevailing wage law is a state law.
Yes.
Now, if we had a city ordinance that require prevailing wage on certain project, then if a violation of that, would that be an administrative citation? It's like a violation of a conditional use permit.
The administrative citation process here can apply to violations of the city code. So if there was a city code that addressed that, then potentially this could apply.
But this is part of a conditional use permit for the approval of the project, right?
And I just say it's difficult to address hypothetical situations. And so I think we should focus on whether you want to approve these amendments to the title, and then we can
My
discuss.
question is, is it any violation of conditional use permit or approval condition of approval would be, we would be able to find, for example, someone promised to deliver a school or a city hall, right? But didn't do it. Then does this apply or not? Or someone promised something as a condition of approval for a project, right? I think that was what John was talking about much earlier, that for a developer, he was thinking this might apply for a commercial project. So that's my question. For a project, not residential, commercial project that has a conditional approval, and that's violated, what's the city's, does one of these apply, or do we have any mechanism to enforce that?
The city does have mechanisms to enforce conditions of approval, but not through this code enforcement process.
This one.
This does not apply to enforcement of conditions of approval.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second.
Okay.
Can we vote on this now?
Okay.
Madam City Clerk, can you conduct the vote, the roll call?
Vice Mayor Paul just requested that I read the title of the ordinance. I'll go ahead and do that. This is the first reading of ordinance number 20-2203, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cupertino, amending chapter 1.04, chapter 1.08, right of entry for inspection, chapter 1.09, nuisance abatement, 1.10, administrative citation, fines and penalties, and chapter 1.12, general penalty, to improve process efficiency by adopting best practices, readability, and internal consistency. And I'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Councilmember Chow?
Yes.
Councilmember Sinks?
Aye.
Councilmember Willie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Paul?
Aye.
Mayor Scharf?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Wonderful. We've been going for 2 hours since we started, so let's take a short break before the next item because it may be a long one as well. So we'll come back at 9:02.
Okay, this is my first attempt. Is audio still bad?
Oh, it's great now.
Way better.
Okay, thank you all for your patience with me. So I'm getting ready to share my screen with you and I will start my presentation. So this is an item that comes before you every year and the presentation is working okay, right?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you again. So before you, we have the fiscal year 2020-2021 grant funding allocations that went to Housing Commission in March. Okay, so annually, the city issues a notice of funding availability and request for proposals, inviting applicants to apply for the city's Housing and Human Services grant funds. The city notified over 150 contacts in the affordable housing development community. In addition, staff met with developers and nonprofits throughout the year to review potential projects. Housing commissioners reviewed all detailed application packets ahead of the public meeting. All packets included a project scope, a detailed budget, and extensive supporting documentation. To summarize the funding sources, the city's Housing and Human Services Grant Program consists of 3 funding sources for eligible projects and programs in the community. CDBG programs and projects are funded by federal HUD grant funds. BMR affordable housing programs and projects are funded by housing mitigation fees collected from residential and non-residential development projects. General Fund Human Services grant programs are funded through the General Fund. Capital housing funds are released on an annual basis. The Housing Commission is recommending implementation of a 3-year funding cycle for public service funds to streamline the application process and lessen the requirements for agencies seeking limited funding. So for the CDBG funds, Cupertino is one of 9 entitlement jurisdictions within Santa Clara County that receives grant funding directly from HUD. HUD awards grants to entitlement communities to carry out a wide range of community development activities directed towards revitalizing neighborhoods, economic development, and providing improved community facilities and services. CDBG funds must benefit low and moderate income households. As has been the case in earlier years, the city has put into place a CDBG contingency plan to allow for increases or decreases to the funding amounts based on the final HUD allocation formula. This year, we did receive notification from HUD ahead of the meeting that our entitlement amount is $389,308. So we are working with an exact dollar amount this year. So breaking down the CDBG funds, the first pot is CDBG Capital Housing Funds. Capital Housing Project funds are on a 1-year funding cycle, and they account for 65% of the city's CDBG funds. The program is directed towards expanding and maintaining the affordable housing supply, promoting housing opportunities and choices, maintaining and improving community facilities, accessibility, energy efficiency and sustainability, and providing supportive services specifically for persons of very low and/or low income. The city received 2 applications in this category. Funding allocations are recommended as noted in the table. So now we have the CDBG Public Service Funds, which is currently on a 2-year cycle, and this would be part of the recommendation to move to a 3-year cycle. CDBG Public Service Funds account for 15% of the city's CDBG funds and must benefit low and moderate income households. Eligible activities include services for senior citizens, homeless persons, and other programs serving low and moderate income households. We have 3 applications before you. Due to our cap on funds, we're recommending funding 2 of the applications, and the 3rd, SALA, we're recommending to be funded with general funds. Now we have the below market rate affordable housing funds, which are split into the 2 pots, the capital housing funds and the public service funds. The city estimates up to $6 million will be available to fund eligible below market rate affordable housing capital housing projects for fiscal year 2021 after accounting for administrative and other expenses. These funds are on a 1-year cycle and must be used for the provision of affordable housing in the city. Eligible projects include land acquisition, new construction, acquisition, or rehabilitation of buildings for permanent affordability and substantial rehabilitation. BMR affordable housing funds are issued as loans with a 30-year term and a requirement to enter into a 99-year regulatory agreement with the city. It is expected that projects must proceed expeditiously to construction. In other words, projects must be shovel-ready in order to qualify for these funds. As you see, we do not have any applications to consider for the BMR Capital Housing Project funds for fiscal year 2021. The city aimed to leverage larger projects with these funds. As noted earlier, the NOFA was sent out to over 150 contacts in the affordable housing development community. Over the course of the year, staff met with developers and nonprofits to review potential projects and received feedback that the high cost of land coupled with allowed densities makes projects economically infeasible. The city will continue to explore strategies to invite more applicants. Now we have the below market rate public service funds. A portion of the city's below market rate affordable housing fund is available to public service agencies to provide services in our community. Eligible programs include tenant landlord dispute resolution, fair housing programs, and other programs serving low and moderate income households. In April of 2018, City Council set an annual limit of $50,000 for this fund. And here we have one application for fair housing for this source. And last, we have the General Fund Human Services Grant Funds. In April of 2018, City Council increased the general fund allocations toward the Human Services Grant to an annual amount of $100,000 to provide ongoing funding to programs serving the homeless. Eligible programs include services for senior citizens, homeless persons, and other programs serving low and moderate income households. Due to the expanding homeless crisis, it is expected that programs serving the homeless will continue to increase. The Housing Commission is therefore requesting an increase in the general fund allocation towards the Human Services Grant Fund from $100,000 to an annual amount of $125,000 starting in fiscal year 2020 through 2021 to account for the increase in demand. The most important part of the program is the reporting and monitoring. All awarded programs and projects will begin on July 1st. Throughout the year, staff provides ongoing technical assistance to each organization. Organizations are required to submit quarterly reports and requests for reimbursements to the city. Due to the stringent requirements of CDBG capital housing funds, organizations receiving these specific funds work with a CDBG compliance consultant. In addition, organizations receiving CDBG funds are monitored annually for compliance with HUD regulations. So next steps before you are to adopt the draft resolution, review the implementation of a 3-year funding cycle for the public services, review increasing the general fund allocation to account for an increase in homelessness services, and then the city will enter into contracts with these agencies for a July 1st start date. And I am available to answer any questions you might have on behalf of the city and on behalf of the agencies that applied. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Madam City Clerk, do we have anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this agenda item?
I see no one, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Okay. Seeing no one, we'll bring it back to council. That closes the public comment for this agenda item. I see Mr. Willie has his hand raised.
So yeah, thank you, Carrie. Questions that I've got, I'm definitely supportive of things that really help those that need the help. I mean, so on this particular item, it sounds to me, can you just kind of help me to understand it though, that the $389,000 is actually being distributed to the city to administer to these places that need the funds? Is that how it works?
Correct. So for the community development block grant, we essentially are a pass-through agency for the needs in our community. So we receive these federal funds.
Yeah. So this year it's 389. What was it last year? So did it already?
It was around 365-ish. I can find the exact number.
So then I heard you saying that for the general fund human services, you were thinking that that needs to go up to 125,000, but I'm thinking that that's still adding up. Well, without the increase, it's still part of this 389.
So the general fund human services grant would be in addition to the CDBG funds. That's the city's set aside for public services serving Cupertino that aren't as strict as the federal.
On one of the slides, it said the one item was 83K, one item was 174K, and one at 38. And so that seemed to still be quite a bit less than the 389. So although it was titled General Fund Human Services and, kind of being in addition to, it didn't look to me like the 389 was used up on those other categories. Is my math just not correct?
I think
So
maybe
we
you need to
have,
look at the overhead and administrative costs maybe.
correct. So we do, with our CDBG funds, we do put all of the money out into the community each year. We don't keep a reserve. And the mayor is correct. We do keep a program administration fee of $20,000 for staff time for the monitoring, the reporting, the compliance for CDBG dollars. And then
So-
the 83,000 that you are referring to, I believe, is the fiscal year 2019 general funds monies. We gave 83,000 into the community, and
Okay.
West Valley has come back and requested an increase of $25,000 for their Haven to Home program, and $4,000 of that includes bus passes. It was a council request from the homelessness study session back in January. So as we all know, they've seen a significant increase in homelessness in Cupertino, and they've come in and requested additional funds for that program.
So I'm almost where I'm up with you. So the general fund human services category, though, is not included in the CDBG funds. That's coming from the city's reserve, the city's funding.
Correct. So we have the 3 different pot of funds, and the CDBG funds have 2 sub-pots, capital housing and public service. The below market rate affordable housing fund is the same. We have capital housing and public service out of those city dollars. And then the third pot that you're speaking to, the general fund human services grant, currently has a $100,000 carve out for public services. And then this year, if council approves, we would increase it to 125,000. And if council doesn't approve, we would reduce West Valley's Haven to Home program to meet the $100,000 cap.
And
it's
so we
contingent
already,
upon the increase.
yeah, so we already had the increase of about 25,000 from the CDBG funds. And now we would also then be asked to increase the city's contribution. Okay. What's it look like, is it typical for the CDBG funds to increase every year, year over year? Like next year, is it going to increase again? And
We have seen about a 5 to 10% increase. I was surprised to see $20,000 this year. It also demonstrates the need for low and moderate income services offered by local government. So I think as the demand increases, the pot of funds might be recognized as more in demand by the federal government as well.
so one last question, and that is, the homelessness factor seems to be so evident, increasing by more than 5 or 10% per year. And so if we really were interested in trying to assist with homelessness and how to help those as best we can, then if there was an organization that was specifically, because when I look at these ones, there's a lot of different descriptions, but not any of them clearly saying that they need, $25,000 to assist the homeless population. It seems like the categories are much more general than that. Is there no agency that really does have a focus for the homelessness?
So here before us in these applications, all of these agencies are currently funded by the city in our program in 1920. So I would call them repeat agencies. They continue to serve a need in our community. And Maitri Transitional Housing, who is in the general fund category, they would be considered homelessness prevention. They are housing women and children that are coming out of domestic violence, and they're providing them temporary housing. And then West Valley's Haven to Home program, I believe, is almost 100% homeless services. They provide food pantry services. They provide job training. And so West Valley is the agency in our area that does all of our local homelessness services, and they're the queue for the county's homelessness coordination system. So for anyone to access county resources, they have to come in through a case manager, and West Valley is one of those certified agencies.
So maybe that answers the question. I'm not quite sure. When we hear about in the previous council meeting, and we kind of talked a little bit about it, that San Jose got 115 trailers for housing individuals that needed it. And Santa Clara County, when I was at their weekly meeting, and they said that they had 15 trailers. And, that to me really speaks to they're actually trying to get those people off the street, where the other method that you talked about, the food pantry and things, by all means, people have to eat. But I'm kind of, really wondering, when we have these encampments at 280 on Wolf on both sides and stuff, in our small community, of course, we're not big like San Jose or Santa Clara, but in our small community with the homeless people that we have, if there was an agency that truly is trying to make available spots, whatever they are, for the people that would otherwise be in tents. And that's why I say I'd like to keep it separate from providing food pantry items for people in poverty that are coming and knocking on their door, and they're assisting them with groceries. But that really disadvantaged group of people that have nothing else to do but to sleep under the overpass or something, it'd sure be nice if there was a line item on our assistance programs that however much they were able to do, might be very little or it might be significant, that we could truly say, wow, there are people going out and with some funds that they have, going out and trying to let these individuals that are under the bridge or in the tents, that could put them under some type of better roof. And so I just wondering if there isn't any agency that really does focus on that. If that was on our list, boy, I would just really be all smiles, but it is what it is.
So I think I can do a better job of representing West Valley here with my answer. So the program I spoke about, I'm looking at attachment C, which is the detailed description of the applications. And I gave you an answer before for their CARE program, community access to resources and education. And that's the food pantry and job training. And a lot of that has some homelessness prevention. But speaking to your point, council member, we do have that line item. I'll give you the detailed description of the Haven to Home program. And as you said, I think it'll be all smiles. So Haven to Home, which is the request for the general fund for the $65,000, they will specifically serve 50 homeless individuals and families. The program description is to help currently unhoused Cupertino individuals and families secure permanent housing, maintain employment, enhance income opportunities, and build financial stability. And with the support of City Council in January at the study session, they will now provide direct services, including bus passes. So if you recall, we talked about helping our homeless folks move around to the services that are outside of Cupertino, and Council had recommended bus passes in the next work program. And West Valley was able to accommodate that request right away and put that amount here. So I'm sorry.
So that includes their request for the additional $25,000 for that particular bucket is kind of what it sounded like in your earlier thing. So they had increased by 25,000 their request, and that was in the, I think I was hearing that was the havens to home category.
Yes, and Haven to Home will 100% serve homeless folks. So
That's great to hear. Yes.
yes, and the increase in the request for an increase of funds is due to the request, or is due to the increase in homelessness, unfortunately. So that's why Housing Commission is recommending an increase in general fund to accommodate that need.
So I would say that definitely let them know that I'm definitely in favor of them bringing that to us. And, you know, this is our community. And so I think that's a part of our community that we do need to be focused on. And so, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you,
You're
John.
welcome. I should also add one more thing. West Valley will be using the funds to provide a full-time case manager for these 50 households, because as we know, I can't say it enough, there's a demand, an increasing demand every day for homelessness services. So West Valley is responding to that.
Okay, thank you. So who else would like to speak? Everyone needs to go one time. So Darcy, go.
Yeah, so Carrie, are you able to pull up Exhibit 1 of our draft resolution? It's the CDBG contingency plan in case the funding is higher or lower than anticipated.
Yeah. Let me open that up.
Great, thanks. If you could just pull that up and then share your screen.
Sure. Okay. Okay.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so here we have the increase. If the funds were expected to be a certain amount, but they actually came in as higher, it looks like what we're doing is recommending these three areas be adjusted. So it's public services, administration, and capital housing projects. My first question is, are these in some kind of priority order? Are we recommending that the increase first go to public services and then to admin and then to capital housing projects?
No, I think we were just wanting to make sure that each category was whole. And I can let you know, this was put into place 2 years ago because the federal budget hadn't come out ahead of our public hearings. But this year we do know our exact amount, so we don't need to use the contingency plan in our funding allocations.
Right, understood.
Yeah.
But with regard to this as an ongoing document, if we do have an increase or a decrease based upon what we're expecting, so we're not saying even allocate it evenly among public services, admin, and capital housing projects. Are we basically just saying these are the three considerations that we have, and it will be up to some discretion as to how these dollars are allocated? Is there more clarity as to how we go about choosing from this list as to which dollars go there first, or which ones are removed first if it's a decrease?
Sure. So the CDBG funds come with a cap on each funding category. So the public services, you can only spend 15%, administration is 20%, and capital housing is 65%. And so within any over or unders in those amounts, we would distribute in public services to any applicant that hasn't gotten their full amount. We would try to get them to their full request, and then we would look at distributing above and beyond to the others. And then let's see, for administration, that's the flat 20%. And then for capital housing projects, I think what we're basically saying here for the increase is anyone who didn't get their full amount, we would go there first. And then if we have extra, we could be more generous with the rest of the agencies. And then in the funding decrease, the goal was to make sure that agencies could provide the level of service that they're looking to. So we did not want to bring anyone below $15,000 as a goal for public services. because below $15,000, it's hard to administer any program. So we would start there. And then we were saying we would supplement any administration costs with the general fund. And then for capital housing projects, this would be up to our discretion that we may supplement it with BMR funds. We haven't had that situation yet. And CDBG funds have such strict requirements that oftentimes applicants for CDBG capital housing projects don't come in also for below market rate affordable housing funds. So they're two separate pots of funds with different requirements.
Okay, got it. Well, I really appreciate it. And the percentage breakdowns were really useful with regard to, how many dollars are going into each bucket here. So, I thought it was a very thoughtful allocation. I appreciate your work as well as the Housing Commission's work on reviewing these. So I'm supportive of the allocations. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Darcy spoke, John spoke, Liang Chow, welcome.
Unmute. Okay. So I think we have just want to clarify, not that just want to clarify the need. And so we have just allocated $50,000 to West Valley Community Services, right? And those were for for rental assistance. So these are for different purposes. One is for below market rate housing and for homeless services. So these are separate. These are funding that will go for different purposes. That's why we want to provide more funding for West Valley, right? Just
correct.
Right. Okay. And I see that I think Cdbg fund is allocated to each city according to our population from the census?
Yes,
I hope everyone filled out. So is there any requirement that we use this funding for Cupertino residents? And so are these programs, do they have any limit that they will apply, give preference to Cupertino residents first? Or it might be in general?
So it is limited to low and moderate income households in Cupertino. So the agencies have to demonstrate to us quarterly when they request the reimbursement that they have served a Cupertino resident. And for CDBG funds, it's very, very strict. We do an annual monitoring every year.
Cupertino residents.
Yes.
Okay, but for our our human services fund from the general fund, we don't have that limitation, right? So West Valley could use the funding for anyone in their service area.
So all of the funds are limited to low and moderate income in serving Cupertino. So we
are we limiting that for human services grant? Are we limiting them to only service Cupertino residents too?
I believe so.
Only about that. I just feel I want to know.
Yeah, yes, it is all limited to Cupertino.
Okay. Great, that's all.
Okay.
Okay, great. Rod.
Hey, thank you very much. We do this every year, and so I've gotten my questions generally answered year over year. I think it's appropriate for us to increase the amount from the general fund to $125K this year. And at this point, I would like to, unless there's input from the public, I'd like to make a motion.
Go for it.
Thank you. I'd like to move that we, number one, adopt resolution number 20-043, recommending that the fiscal year 2020-21, 2021-22, and 2022-23 CDBG, BMR, AHF, and HSG funding allocations. Two, that we approve implementation of a 3-year funding cycle for CDBG public service, BMR, HF public service, and HSC grants commencing in this next fiscal year, 2020-21. And that 3, we increase the general fund allocation towards the HSG fund from $100,000 to an annual amount of $125,000 starting in fiscal year 2020-21. And 4, we authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute fiscal year 2020-21, 2021-22, and 2022-23 CDBG, BMR, AHF, and HSC grant agreements. And with appreciation to the work of our housing manager and to the Housing Commission. That's my motion.
And I'll second it.
Great. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Chow,
Aye.
Councilmember Sinks,
Aye.
Councilmember Willie,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Paul,
Aye.
Mayor Scharf.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, great. We are on to item number 11. Ordinance extending the validity of planning entitlements and permits issued by the Community Development Department, extending the time for city review and action on development applications in the event state law deadlines are extended, and temporarily suspending certain CEQA requirements as provided by executive order. We have the staff report on this.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, allow me to introduce Eric Serrano, Senior Planner with the Planning Division, to present the staff report on this item. And we both are here to answer questions. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'll start sharing my presentation. Okay, good to go. All right, so we will be discussing the urgency ordinance extending entitlement and permit deadlines. As you know, there have been a series of shelter-in-place orders issued through the county and state beginning March 16th from the county, March 19th with the state, March 31st for the county, and April 29th from the county, extending it to May 31st. The March 16th was the first order that limited a lot of non-essential work in operation, including prohibitions on most residential and almost all commercial construction activity. Santa Clara County's March 31st order limited types of non-essential services and work and prohibited most residential construction and almost all commercial construction, causing many construction projects and activities to stop. On April 29th, Santa Clara County ordered an updated shelter-in-place order with projects and developers and builders required to comply with construction project safety protocols beginning this past Monday on May 4th. With some of the permits set to expire, we fear that some projects may be inconsistent with the social distancing requirements in order to prevent expiration of some permits. There also has been some impact on design professionals with having to adjust to a new work environment, working from home, and adjusting to their capabilities from home. So there are several extensions that we're looking at. So building permit applications for 180 days. There is a desk item that was provided that would extend it from 90 to 180 days. This is to be consistent with another city, Palo Alto, who's also implemented an ordinance very similar to ours. Issued building permits would have an extension of 180 days, and approved planning permits would have an extension of 180 days as well. So currently we have around 272 active applications. We received about over 130 during the shelter in place period, and another 90 or so were issued. For approved planning entitlements, we anticipate somewhere between 25 and 30 permits to expire. We don't have definitive numbers just yet. We had some technical difficulties running some reports. And so we don't have that information right now, but we're working on finalizing that data. So permit processing deadlines. So state law specifies various timelines for timely action on permits and planning approval. So things like the Permit Streamlining Act, Housing Accountability Act, Subdivision Map Act. Many of these items are already reflected in our city code. And as staff, we've continued to operate on normal business operations. These deadlines have not become an issue yet. However, in the event that there are challenges meeting these deadlines, the proposed ordinance includes a provision to extend these deadlines should state law or the governor permit through an executive order. And the proposed ordinance also includes a provision recognizing Executive Order N-54-20, which is pertaining to CEQA deadlines, which suspends certain public filing, posting, notice, and public access requirement under CEQA for 60 days. Noticing public comments, we received no public comment at this time. There's no noticing required for the urgency ordinance. The project or the ordinance is exempt from CEQA through section 15378. Is not defined as a project, and if it were to be defined a project, we can say that as it can be seen with no certainty to have no possible significant effect on the environment. No fiscal, I should say no sustainability impact, and no fiscal impact is anticipated. And with that, the recommended action is to find the proposed action exempt from CEQA and enact urgency ordinance number 20-2204. And with that, that concludes our presentation, and available for any questions.
Before we go to questions, do we have any from the public that wishes to speak on this, Madam City Clerk?
I see none, Mr. Mayor.
Wonderful. Okay, we'll bring it back to council. If anyone wishes to speak, we each get one turn. Please raise your hand. Okay, Mr. Willie.
So, thank you, Eric. So, refresh my memory, you went through it pretty quick. I think you said there were 3 types of permits. Building permits, 90 days going to 180 days. The middle one I missed, and then planning permits going to 180 days. What was the one that I missed?
So there's building permit applications, issued building permits, and approved planning permits. So there's 3 categories for that. So the reason why building has 2 is because there's application and issuance, and planning is essentially approved. We already have stipulations in our code to allow us to work with applicants to keep permits active up to 60 days, as long as they're working towards getting that project completed. So
that, great, that took care of that. So then when I read the material, and so for the first one, it said, section 1, subsequently grant a second extension of 90 days. So that tells, what I'm reading there is the original permit has 90 days, and this is saying it's going to, once that 90 days is up, you're going to give them a second extension, or give them an extension of 90 days. But then it says, and to extend by 180 days the following permits. And so that sounds a little confusing. So the permit has 90 days, they're going to get another 90 days, but then they're going to get another 180 days. I mean, that's sounding like a whole year.
No, it's meant to be just the 180 days during the.
So the 180 days then means the 90 days that originally existed on the permit plus the extension of 180, because it says, and to extend. And to extend.
I just clarify, those are for 2 different types of permits, I believe, right? They're referencing 2 different municipal code sections. So the first, and correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, the way I'm reading this.
Yeah, the first section is for permit applications, and the other is for issued permits.
So the extending by 90 days, the following permit applications submitted to the chief buildings pursuant to CMC Chapter 16 in that specific section. And then to extend by 180 days permits that are issued pursuant to a different section. So
This is
oh,
Pew
I'm sorry,
coming.
that has a different expiration. So maybe Pew, you should help me here.
Yes, so there are, my understanding, state law only allows building permit applications to be extended by 90 days at a time. And as a result, we had to write the language a little awkwardly but it allows multiple extensions of 90 days. And therefore the language is written that way to make sure that we capture that we're only extending it by 90 days and then a subsequent 90 days for a certain category of permits. However, another category of building permits, those are already issued, can be extended for a total of 180 days at one time. So it's talking about two different categories. One is applications and one are issued permits. But due to a quirk in state law, we had to write it up a little quirkily. Bottom line is both building permit applications and issued building permits are being extended each by 180 days.
Yeah, that's a half a year. So thank you for the clarification. 90 days seems like a reasonable amount, at least for the shelter in place that we're currently under, which is now starting to be lifted. And so when we start saying a whole half a year, 180 days, but I'll mull that over. But then when I go to section 2, and that first one, was extending them without saying something about lifting of the shelter in place. Now, section 2 says that hereby extended until the shelter in place is lifted plus an 180 days. So now if Governor Newsom lifts the shelter in place as of, let's say June 30th, then we're going to extend it another half a year on top of that. Again, that's why I'm asking. It just seems like a half a year. And then I jump all the way down to number 12, which maybe is just repeating those. Shall remain in effect until the shelter in place order is lifted, plus an additional 180 days. And so the reason I kind of get a little concerned, I don't know if I should refer to it, but to me, it's part of the problem. If, hopefully this doesn't apply to commercial project. I mean, if this is a resident and he's unable to work with his architect, work with his contractor, I'm very easygoing to allow that. When we're talking about commercial ones where we have both Marina and the Hamptons, and they're not moving on their approvals that we've given them, just make sure that this in no way is going to allow them to extend their permit approvals for another half a year when they have meandered for so long rather than, doing something reasonable. So are they not going to be able to add this on to their approvals if their approvals if they don't start building by that particular time? So, oh, but we've got another 180 days because you guys passed this ordinance.
So with regard to both Marina and the Hamptons, they do have development agreements in place, and those would be the expiration dates for that particular project. This is only this pertains to planning projects. So it pertains to the not to projects that have development agreements in place for them. And so those are contractual contracted time limits on that, contractual time limits. But this is only with regard to planning permits that most of these would be smaller projects. This could be a commercial project, but it could, like I said before, these could impact small business owners as well that have small facade improvement projects that are due to expire and they just have not had a chance to get started working on their plans and such. But yes, they would apply to both commercial and residential projects.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else? Okay. I'll go, okay.
Hi.
Councilmember Chow.
So, just trying to see from the other side of, would this extending of the permit, I think it's a great thing that we are doing. We need to do that. But would that put burden on people who might be expecting this project to finish in time? Maybe they have invested financially on certain things. Or I'm just wondering where there will be impact on the other parties who are expecting a certain result. Do we know?
We're not aware of necessarily of people that are expecting a certain result as an outcome of this particular proposed ordinance. Is that the question, Councilmember Charles?
Like a delay, certain projects might be delayed. Would that become a financial burden on another party?
Well, we're not aware of that. We're only trying to do this as a measure to ease some of the burden on professionals that are struggling to figure out how to work from home and on projects that might be design heavy and try to figure all of that out. And we're more aware of in cases, particularly when the construction restrictions were in place. The severe, construction restrictions, we had people wanting to move, and that was becoming an issue because they weren't able to schedule inspections and such. We're just trying to help the community.
So for the projects that they were classified essential business, so they have been able to continue. Would this apply to them too?
Only if they have this. Yes, I mean this applies to all building permit applications.
Or even those who have been progressing since they qualify as essential business.
This has to do with building permits that have been issued. Yes, so they would get an extension had they expired. So if they're an active permit, they don't need an extension. So these would apply to things that would have expired or will expire while this shelter in place is in effect.
Okay.
But if they have been continuing construction and receiving inspections, they're not at risk of expiring.
So just wondering, in case someone still are not able to continue in 90 days, even with the extension, would they be able to say put a pause on the permit so that they can continue later and not be charged as a new permit?
So I do believe we have our building official on the line who might be able to, or on this.
Maybe financially they cannot finish right now. Can they pause it?
So,
yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yes, I can answer that. Albert, our building official. So, to answer your question, there are permits. I'm trying to figure out there are permits that expire that they can apply for an extension. And if they don't expire during the shelter in place and they expire beyond that, they can apply for an extension. But I think the benefit of this ordinance is the fee waiver. We will automatically extend permits that expire during the shelter in place. It's just an automatic extension. So did I answer your question?
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, was there anyone else? Okay, if not, let's see, so Rod or Darcy, you don't want to speak on this item?
Good.
Okay, so we can have someone, I need to go back to the agenda here. Somebody make a motion on this item.
Okay, I'll make just a quick statement before, like I had mentioned, a little bit struggling about extending permits for a half a year. But I think when I think about that, and if it was only a delay due to the shelter in place, I would be inclined to say, 6 months after the shelter in place, let's not let permits just linger and get stale. 90 days would be, a good amount. I think Albert said that they already have a automatic 90-day extension. So this, I think, covers that. But when we also consider that going forward, coming out of this, it's not going to be business as usual. So things that might have taken, couple months getting concrete contractors and then doing forming and then needing to get their permits signed off. All of a sudden, it's not going to be business as usual, and things may take, twice as long. So that, I would say, would cover the extra 90 days, bringing it to a total 180 days, which I still think is a lot. But if planning feels that that's the right number, I think at this point with where we're at, I'll just go ahead and trust them. So I'll make a move that ordinance number 20-2204 be read in title only, and that the city clerk's reading constitute the first reading thereof, and that it's not going to require a impact to CEQA. Do I need to say the order N-54-20?
Okay, I think that's
Mr. Mayor, if I might suggest, there were certain red lines that were provided as a desk item, if those can be incorporated into the motion.
certainly. So John, do you want to modify your motion to incorporate the red line desk items?
Sure, and what I was actually reading earlier included those red lines. So yes, sorry I didn't mention that.
Okay, no, I wouldn't have thought to say it either, so that's fine. Takes a long time to learn to do motions as good as Rod and Darcy. Okay, so I will second that motion. There's no more discussion. Can we have a roll call?
Councilmember Chow,
Aye.
Councilmember Sinks.
I'm sorry, did we read it by title?
I'll do that
Yeah, let's do that.
after this. Okay. This is the first and only reading and enactment of urgency ordinance number 20-2204, an urgency ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cupertino extending the validity of planning entitlements and permits issued by the Community Development Department, extending the time for city review and action on development applications in the event state law deadlines are extended, and temporarily suspending certain CEQA requirements as provided by Executive Order 20-20.
And just to be clear, the specific language I think that we want in the motion is that we're finding the proposed action is exempt from CEQA, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, what John said was not quite that. Right. Okay.
Okay.
Now we can vote.
Yep.
Okay, I'll start over. Councilmember Chow,
Aye.
Councilmember Sinks,
Aye.
Councilmember Willie,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Paul,
Aye.
Mayor Sharp.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, so that
And Mr. Mayor, we just needed one more motion for an enactment.
Oh, okay.
This is an emergency ordinance.
Oh, so John, you need to move to enact the ordinance.
Okay, I move to enact ordinance 20-2204 and that it's exempt from the CEQA requirements.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think you need to say the secret thing again.
Ordinance being enacted.
Okay, so you move to enact it, I'll second it, vote.
Councilmember Chow,
Aye.
Councilmember Sinks,
Aye.
Councilmember Willie,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Paul,
Aye.
Mayor Sharp.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, now we are on, there's no more oral communications. So council and staff comments and future agenda items. Before we go to council, does the staff have anything to say? Madam City Manager, are you still there?
I don't have anything additional to my COVID update today.
Okay. No other council. Okay, so we're back to future agenda items. So let's go around the room. Rod, you have your hand up.
Thank you so much. I just would like to appreciate our reaching accommodation with one of our labor unions earlier this afternoon. I had concerns through the weekend, given the timeline and the communication and the concern that was raised by our employees. I don't think we need an agenda item for this, but I would just like to say that, yeah, I wanted to thank everybody for working this out. And I would appreciate if we are going to take systematic actions that affect a number of employees in the future. I mean, I'm not talking about individual actions, but things that affect a number of employees, that we have an opportunity to be briefed on them in advance. And if there's issues or controversy, that we have an opportunity to have a council discussion. So that's my request. So I'll leave that open because, it's hard to say when that might next happen. And I realize in the time of this pandemic that we have all kinds of challenges employing people. I'm particularly pleased to hear that we're getting creative about people taking jobs that are needed at this time rather than what they may have learned in the past. And so I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Okay, let me unmute. Okay, Councilmember Chow, future agenda items.
Okay, hi. So I think, so first I checked the work program. And actually the work program item for the code of enforcement is, here it reads, penalties for violation of conditions of approval and code enforcement best practices. This is the work program item. That's why I thought, oh, I don't remember having this work program item that's about all the violation fees. That may be part of it, but I think the main thing was violation for conditions of approval. What's the penalty? I think that was what the council wanted to talk about. And that's somehow missed in this item. So that's, I wonder if the staff has made some progress on this or it's completely missed. Then, so that's one thing. I think we need to look at the violations of conditions of approval. And then the other thing I talked about was the prevailing wage. Yes, it's a state law. However, we are, I think we do need to enforce that law. And if we then we need to be sure that we include that either in our municipal code or conditions of approval. When it's a non-government project that has the prevailing wage requirement, so that we are paying people living wage as required. Since this kind of project qualifies for certain benefits, waivers and stuff, right? So they should be accountable for that. And it doesn't seem we have right now a way to be accountable or even have transparency on that issue. I think we need to look into that. And the third thing is the small cells. I think this discussion we had today should have been done a year ago. That many cities have adopted ordinances last year because of the new FCC rule. So when this happens, a federal law preempt the city's ability to do certain things, we should act in a way to see what other things we could still do to protect our residents. And this is the kind of thing we should have been doing last year. So that's schedule that one to come back as soon as possible. Okay, so should I get second on this?
So I'll second that. Yep.
All of them?
Thank you.
And I would be willing to put that on the agenda anyway. I think we should try to look at what other cities are doing in terms of setting reasonable requirements for distances. Although I would point out that, so far, none of the proposed small cells are any closer than what the other cities were already.
Yeah, I know. I think maybe at our discretion is really transparency, that whether it's at the council level, administrative level, that way we can help encourage certain preferred behavior. That's all we can do, I know, but then we can still try to do something. And the other thing is the violation of conditional use permit study. I think that was this year's council agenda work program and prevailing wage law enforcement.
Okay.
So do I have second on those?
I'm not sure what you're asking with, we already do prevailing wage enforcement. So what are you asking?
We currently do prevailing wage enforcement for city project. But for a private project, there is no enforcement, no transparency at all. No one is, they are not required to report anything to the city or to anyone.
Right, the city doesn't do it, but the other entities that are,
what other entities?
Prevailing wage are doing it. Like the labor unions and are looking at that. Now, I don't know that
for a specific city project, we approve the project by giving them special benefits,
right.
Extra density, or streamlined.
So can the city
May I
attorney
suggest, that we would come back and I would report to council on that. And I think we could do it through a report from the city attorney to council members.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
And the violation of conditional use permit that we missed. I think that was.
What is this?
Initially, as a work program item was we should look at whether we should have what kind of penalties do we have for violation of conditional use permit? Because the question from the community was, oh, how come Palo Alto can apply this penalty and Cupertino doesn't? Do we not have that kind of mechanism?
Penalty for what?
Violation of conditional use, condition of approval or conditional use permit.
Give an example of what.
Well, for example, in the Palo Alto case is certain community benefits they promised but didn't.
Right.
Or that the certain mitigation measures they promised they would do but didn't. I think conditions of approval has a lot of conditions. So who enforces them? What happens when they are not done?
Okay, so you're asking for
a long list
for violations of conditional use permits.
Yeah. Conditions of approval also.
I mean, it would seem we could have hundreds of different cases where they might be violated. How would we do this where we would?
Can I ask Pew to respond? I can ask you to respond to that.
That's in our work program, by the way. I didn't bring that up today.
Oh, okay. In the
2019 work program.
2020. Okay, so yeah, Madam City Manager, what do you have any idea if that is a work program item that is still being worked on, or was pushed off, or what?
Mr. Mayor, if Pew Ghosh, Planning Manager, if I may answer, we do believe that with the adopted changes tonight with the Title I, that work program item is complete. Violations of any conditions of approval constitute a violation of this particular code, and as a result could be cited under Title I with the changes that we made tonight.
So in other words, Pew, if someone had a violation of a condition of approval, they would be subject to all of these citation schedules and all that stuff.
Correct, and that is under section 1912-180C. So that is already called out as a violation. So if you violate any condition of approval, it's a violation of our Muni Code, and therefore subject to all the code enforcement that is available to us. In addition to that, if there is substantial evidence that the conditions of a permit or a variance are not being implemented, then they can be called up for a public hearing with, and in that case, the conditional use permit may be revoked. But that is, that is only if it is an egregious violation, if somebody does not come into compliance. It's another arm of code enforcement that we can pursue.
Okay, that's good to know. But then when I asked this specific question on that agenda item, I was told to not ask the question.
I'm just pointing to what the code currently says, Councilmember Chow.
So, okay, good. So which I should be able to find in the municipal code that's included?
It is in section 1912-180C.
1912.
Both the sections that I talked about, one is calling out violations as violations of conditions of approval, violation of the code, that's subsection C, and subsection D calls out revocation of permits.
So they are subject to the same fine level as $100 and $300
and the 500, and
even for a very big project.
Correct.
That's
and
probably Councilmember John was trying to get to also, that for a large project versus one single family home, whether I think that was the intent of the original council program was, should we have the same level of violation fine for?
So it would, the council could, if it indeed were egregious violations of the code, then the council could get involved and impose $1,000 per violation per day fine, the penalty, and that would not be subject to any maximum totals per what was removed tonight.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Great. Good to know.
All right. Darcy, did you have any future agenda item?
Nope. Thank you.
Rod, I think you already went. I do not have anything. John, did we already go to you? I can't remember.
No.
John, let me just say, you've got to do something about your background. I don't know if you see yourself on the screen.
I do.
Your hair is purple.
Oh.
I think it looks awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
So at any rate, okay. So, we talked quite a bit tonight about the small cells, and I just want to say one more time, I really do want the residents to understand we are here listening to them, and we need to, get a city policy so that they truly know. So bringing this back as a policy or ordinance, yes, that's very important. The other one we mentioned was the election expenditures. And I kind of see this as a fairly simple investigation by Kirsten and Bill, and then just bringing it back to us and giving us an idea of what could we do on a first pass in this election year. Do we have to spend a lot of time and dot every I and cross every T? I think we can truly learn as we go. And so I would like to try and indicate that I don't expect it to be a very involved process. Then I would touch on, right under it there. I did attend the Chamber of Commerce. They had a webinar about this COVID-19 effect on the small businesses and small businesses potentially needing to declare bankruptcy. And so why bring this up? It's just, you know, when you figure that these businesses that truly have to have, you know, an income stream, it's already very hard for small businesses to meet their payroll, meet their expenses when they do have fluctuating commerce. I mean, I'm sure glad I'm not in a small business. But at any rate, they really are challenged, and I would not be at all surprised if we do start seeing them needing to declare bankruptcy, because the expenses for their rents and the employees that they needed to continue paying and stuff are going to really put them in a bind. And so it may be that it'll come back and we'll need to look at something about is there anything that we can do to help? So I'll just kind of alert people. The other one, I'll take a quick second. The Rotary had Rod Deirdren Sr. speak about climate change. And while we're currently embroiled in this pandemic, I do think that at some point within the next year, we should have some type of session. Is it going to be a study session, or we do some type of information, maybe a town hall, but using our community platform to help convey what the climate change that is happening and how we all might be able to help in our small ways, because it really is having an effect and it isn't going away. And so nothing that we can directly do right now, but putting the message out there that hopefully for those that listen to his presentation, it really is much more severe than the small bits that we get here and there. So that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Unmute. Okay. Great. Is there anyone have anything else before we adjourn? See, oh, wait, I do have one more thing. I don't know how many of you know former Mayor Patrick Kwok, whose wife just passed away. So I would like to adjourn in memory of Susan Kwok, and our condolences to former Mayor Kwok. Thank you.
Thank you for alerting us, Mayor. That's pretty important. Thank you.
Okay, good night.